hard news stories and headlines might be boring compared to the incendiary stuff you see from hyperpartisans online. But ultimately, it's going to serve you better and let you make up your own mind. Other folks, even if they seem like they're agreeing with you or upholding your worldview, are actually seeking to get you riled up and to kind of use you in a way that, is a bit dishonest, right? So if you can help people understand what the tricks of the trade are, how advertisers make you want a thing, how conspiracy theorists appeal to your psychological needs, they can start to become sort of immune to those. And also, I think, see the importance of facts as the basis for a national conversation.
Welcome back to another episode of Just the Facts with me, Jill Wine-Banks, the Watergate Girl. I have been distraught about the onslaught of false information, of fake news, of mis and disinformation, and I have been desperately trying to communicate facts and to find ways to get those facts to all people who read the news. And one of my very dear friends introduced me to a new thing that I didn't know about called the News Literacy Project, which aims to do exactly that, to help people understand the difference between fact and fiction. It is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization, and I have with me today two guests from that project. I spoke to the founder, Alan Miller, and today I have with me its CEO, whose name is Chuck Salter, and also I have its Chief Education Officer, Peter, joining us as well. And I just want to make clear that this is not CRT, it's critical thinking. Don't confuse the two. They teach people how to tell fact from fiction so that they can empower people to navigate all the sources that they are looking at. So Chuck and Peter, I am Peter Adams. I didn't say your last name, I don't think, the last time, the head of education. Thank you so much for joining me. The timing is great, of course, because next week is News Literacy Week, and last week was definitely an onslaught of executive orders that contained a lot of falsehoods, speeches that contained outright lies. And so I am very much looking forward to talking to both of you. And let me start with you, Chuck, and talk about the goals of your project, of News Literacy Project.
Well, sure. And thank you for having us. First, I want to clarify something that you said. I know we were new to you, but NLP was actually founded in 2008.
Yes.
So we've been working on this issue for quite a long time, and over the past couple of years, we actually recommitted ourselves to a different type of goal. And while we're always advancing and developing the practice of news literacy and the teaching of news literacy, our new goal is ultimately to ensure that every student in the United States before they graduate high school is taught to be news literate. Other countries do it, and so we can do it too.
It is, as I say, the founder, of course, has a long career in journalism, a lot of it at the LA Times, and is devoted to this. And you're right, this is not, it's only that I hadn't heard of it. And it's partly because my concern has grown so greatly. I'm sort of assuming that people who are listening to this show are probably news literate. They know how to pick reliable sources. But maybe, Peter, you can talk about some of the methods that you use, the curriculum you use. And then I want to go, well, let's start with that, the methods that you use to teach this.
Sure. So we organize our curriculum kind of around 5 standards. And the first of those standards has to do with differentiating between different kinds of information. So I think in a lot of our information environment today, especially when you're on social media, you get a mix of opinion, speculation, propaganda, news, conspiracy theories over and over again, and ads, right? And very clever ads baked into your feeds. And so I think, that's kind of where we start with young people to say, look, it's not all just content, even though that word has become, very common to describe sort of all information, that there are big differences between these kinds of information. So we try to get students to think about the different primary purposes of information and to really recognize, straight or hard news when they see it versus everything else, versus opinion, versus propaganda, to think about the sources that information is coming from, and if they have any standards. And so when we go from there, we talk about, the standards of quality journalism, or the characteristics of credibility, as we call it. So the importance of things like transparency and independence and accountability, what a concern for those things looks like in practice, and then help try to inoculate them against misinformation and some of those tactics as well, give them an appreciation for the role of a free press in democracy, and then try to help them apply that in their lives as well.
Do you teach them to, for example, look for a second source? If they read something, and I know this happens to me, I've read something and went, oh, that's so great, or that's so awful. It's too good to be true, or it's too bad to be true. And so I look for a second source. And if I don't find it, I assume that it is dis or misinformation. Is that one of the techniques you use?
Yeah, for sure. We try to help students, first of all, keep track of their emotions when they see things. And especially if it's, just a claim on social media from an ordinary user, to have a high degree of skepticism and do a search. But even if it's a standards-based news report, from a legitimate news organization, to look for other coverage, and to realize that early coverage may not have the whole story, not because journalists are lying about it or hiding anything from you, but just because all the facts haven't been confirmed. And people on social media will race ahead with all kinds of unverified details and rumors and theories, some of which may turn out to be true, but a lot of which will turn out not to be. So to practice that kind of patience is another aspect of that.
Those are really good and important lessons. And so Chuck, I understand that you are aiming at middle school and high school, which would, of course, create lifelong people with this knowledge, so that by the time they get to voting age, they can use those skills in deciding which candidate to support. But I know you did think about, and in fact didn't use a target audience of adults. But so let's talk about why that isn't a main focus now of News Literacy Project.
Well, of course. So when NLP began its work, high school, late middle school was the target audience, because the theory went that these students would become the next voters in the next election, either the next 2 years or the next 4 years. And we want an informed electorate, able to think critically and make informed decisions for themselves, not only just in politics and elections, but even in their personal lives, because misinformation and disinformation can affect you financially, it can affect your health, your safety. And so it goes even beyond, the political realm. And I will say that, that's where our curriculum is mainly focused, but we're seeing more and more that the districts that we work with across the country, they're interested in embedding media and news literacy into their curriculum, kindergarten through 12th. And so we're really looking at expanding that this is not a skill set and a practice that someone can learn maybe just because they've seen it once in school, one and done, but that it's something that actually gets integrated into our educational system. And like I said, that's our ultimate goal. But to your I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, to your question, a few years ago, once NLP had reached national scale, which meant to us, we were working with thousands of educators in all 50 states. We're using our materials, we're coming to our professional learning sessions. We asked ourselves as an organization, well, what will we do with that national scale? What will we leverage it to do? And at the time we concluded, well, we will just make the entire country news literate, all 335 million people. And, I will admit that a couple things we assumed to be true wouldn't be, namely that there wasn't a tremendous increase in funding available for moving outside the K-12 education space into the adult population. And what we were finding was we were using our existing financing to support both the K-12 education space work as well as what we called the broader public work. The other thing that we noticed was, while we were quite pleased, one year that we were doing this work, over 70,000 people attended our learning events. We realized that in a country this large, this diverse, and unfortunately this polarized right now, that is just
Yeah.
a drop in the bucket for what we were wanting to do. And that most of the people that were coming to our events and using our resources, they were already, as you mentioned, viewers of this program already predisposed to be news literate, to try to find the facts and really do their research when it came to figuring out what was false and what was the truth. And so we weren't really having the impact that we wanted. And so about 18 months ago, we did decide to refocus our mission back to our core competency, which is the K-12 education space. Like I said, that's where our expertise is, that's where our reputation was. And we believe by focusing just on the K-12 education space, this is an area that we can make a noticeable difference and change the way students are educated in the country. It's a longer term solution, and it will take time,
Yeah.
but we do think ultimately it will be a permanent solution.
Sounds right to me. And I think that it is something that is going to be helpful, not just in terms of news literacy, but as you learn to evaluate and analyze and question, it will apply in all areas of life, whether it is about which TV to purchase or whether it's about which candidate to vote for. It is important that you understand the facts and have the critical thinking skills that it takes to analyze what is true and what isn't. So it is definitely important, and you'll have a lifetime impact with training the younger people. So I sounds like you made a very, very good choice, I would say. And but let me just say also, and maybe Peter, you can address this. You have tools for teachers to use in the classroom, but you do have tools for adults as well. So let's talk about those tools. And before you answer, I want to say to our listeners, our viewers, there is something that affects you, because I'm assuming most of you are not in school anymore, but I could be wrong. But you can work to get this program into your schools to make sure that the children that you know have the benefit of this program. And you can also use the tools that I hope you'll describe now to make yourself even better at what you're doing. So talk about that, please.
Sure, and Jill, just to underscore, what we make available to educators are, resources at no cost that they can customize and use and adapt and adopt. And, they know their students best, they know their students' needs and meet them where they are. So we try to provide, everything from traditional print-based lesson plans and infographics and activities in the classroom that they can download and teach, to e-learning, interactive learning experiences on our Checkology virtual classroom. We also have a newsletter that helps keep teachers up to date called The Sift that comes out every Monday. And then for other non-educator adults, but who have, teens or young people in their lives, who are stakeholders in the lives of young people, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, camp counselors, and other folks, we have a newsletter called Get Smart About News, which is optimized for that audience, just to help them have conversations with their teens to know, hey, do you know how social media algorithms work? Do you know why TikTok is free? Do you know why ads follow you around the internet? Things like that. And also talk to them about news and how confusing this information environment really is. It is frenetic and unbelievably large. And teens today have a bigger, harder job than ever before. Lots of opportunities, but lots of pitfalls as well. And then some of the resources we make for educators for the classroom, for example, our infographics about, thinking clearly and in a nuanced way about the issue of news media bias, for example, or strategies for doing advanced, Google searches or searching the web, in a very specific way and in an empowering way. Those infographics are available to all folks, but they're really created for the classroom. So sometimes they have an ancillary benefit for others as well.
Yeah, I've spent some time on your website, and I would recommend everybody go there because it is a really great website, and it's easy to navigate and get information from. So I definitely recommend that. You've both mentioned, and maybe Chuck, I'll ask you about social media, because it seems now, the main way that people get news. And how it plays to the confirmation bias. So maybe we can talk about what confirmation bias is and how people select, or how, maybe a better way to say it is how information is selected for them to see on these different social media sites, as opposed to a newspaper. And also because of fact checking, which I want to talk about. But first, let's talk about how the information people get is selected, especially when it's not fact checked.
Sure thing. First, I'd like to back up just a second, since you were kind enough to invite people to our website. I'm going to say it. It's just
Okay.
newslit. It's just newslit.org. And so people can come. It's very simple, shortened newsletter. See down to newslit.org. And you can see all of the resources and everything about the organization that might interest you. So I appreciate you plugging that. And look, the question you just asked is really kind of at the core of how we do what we do. And for that reason, I'm going to let Peter answer that question.
For sure. So yeah, confirmation bias, I mean, in simple terms, is just our inclination to give a pass to information that feels right to us, that comports with our existing worldviews, with our existing biases, and to scrutinize much more heavily and sometimes over scrutinize and seek reasons to dismiss information that complicates our worldviews and our beliefs. So social media, dovetails pretty nicely with our confirmation bias, our tendency to do that, and actually just indulges it rather than challenges it, right? So social media algorithms learn the things that you like and the things that you don't like based on not just the accounts you follow, but the posts that you like, that you comment on. They know what gets you angry. They know what gets you hopeful. They know what gets you clicking, and they know what keeps you on platform, right? And that is the primary role of those algorithms. Those content algorithms are just trying to serve you something that will keep you there, keep you clicking, so that they can learn more about you, but more importantly, serve you the ads that are their bread and butter. That's how they make so much money. And so they aren't, designed to inform you. They're not selecting posts. Even if you do follow news organizations, you may see the posts from that news organization that other people like you have liked, rather than, a representative sample of news stories. So when it comes to news consumption, we know from public opinion surveys that lots of people are relying on social media to get news, but it is, no replacement for taking deliberate time to look at headlines, to go to, national, regional, local news sources, websites, the evening newscast, whatever your preferred outlets are, to make that a really, deliberate process.
Or to make sure you follow reliable news sources, which for me at least used to be, and some question now, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and to know, for example, when I read the Chicago Tribune, that it has a particular bias. And so I evaluate their stories along those lines. So it is important to think about what you're getting. But something you said makes me want to ask another question, just for my own personal knowledge. I pretty much ignore what I consider bots or people with a completely different worldview than I have. And rather than engaging them in, are you crazy kind of thing, or that isn't the fact, I just ignore them. By ignoring them, am I increasing the chances that the more of that will be coming my way? Or if I react hostily, will that increase my getting it because it's making me engage? Is that something I should be concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, anything you engage with on social media, you'll generally get more of, even if you're engaging with it to say that you disagree with it, that it offends you, that it's horrible or whatever. And, that's a tactic that a lot of people who are seeking to build influence on social media do, right? To get noticed, to get that kind of engagement, they engage in something some people call rage bait, right? So they put something out knowing that they're going to get people to react that way. Algorithms see that as a positive signal for that account, and it works for them to get noticed. It also builds loyalty with their side, right? So social media, I think, has had this kind of polarizing effect where everybody's trying to one up each other in terms of their, enacting their partisan identities, caricaturing the other side. It's just not a great place for productive civic dialogue most of the time. But I do think that it is important for people to consider other points of view that are offered in good faith and thoughtfully based on accurate information, but engaging with people who are closed-minded, who are just looking for a fight, who aren't going to change their minds no matter what you say, is emotionally exhausting and a waste of time in my view.
You know,
It's Go
Jill,
ahead.
I did an experiment for myself on a social media platform I won't mention the name of, but where because as a nonpartisan organization, none of the staff at NLP is allowed to engage in any kind of partisan discussions online or anything like that, and so to save myself from that, I simply started to like cat and dog videos, videos about space, and
Yes.
videos about history. And within probably a week or two, that is literally all I saw
Yeah.
on my feed. And so
Yeah.
you can, in fact, change what you see. And it's a pretty interesting experiment to run for yourself to just see how the algorithms respond to what you are doing on that platform.
It's interesting. I recently started doing something similar where just before bed, when I want to be happy, I look up dog videos and
Yep,
I love them and they make me happy. And then I go to bed. And of course, I now get a lot of dog videos, but
that's right.
that's okay. I mean, I'm happy with that. But yeah. And otherwise, I do get mostly just the news sources that I follow or the friends that I follow. And but that raises another question, which is not just how you get selected for information, but what will persuade you and what facts. I spoke yesterday for the Chicago History Museum, and one of the comments during the question and answer period had to do with some research that had been done that showed that facts do not persuade people, that you have to basically go for the gut. You have to get to the emotion. And I'm just wondering how you do that. I mean, obviously, I want to say this in a polite way, the most extreme points of view will engage your emotion because you're outraged by them or you love them to death, depending on your point of view. But how do we communicate facts in a meaningful way that might persuade someone?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think, part of our work rests on the assumption that if people are aware that they're being targeted with, you know, in, influential, emotional content, that advertisers and propagandists, do have a playbook that they use. They're trying to, use the your deep-seated beliefs and values against you to elicit an emotional reaction. That they can be sort of wise to those tricks, right? And to understand,
Yeah.
look, in comparison, yeah, hard news stories and headlines might be boring compared to the incendiary stuff you see from hyperpartisans online. But ultimately, it's going to serve you better and let you make up your own mind. Other folks, even if they seem like they're agreeing with you or upholding your worldview, are actually seeking to get you riled up and to kind of use you in a way that is a bit dishonest, right? So if you can help
Yeah.
people understand what the tricks of the trade are, how advertisers make you want a thing, how conspiracy theorists appeal to your psychological needs, they can start to become sort of immune to those, and
Mm.
also I think see the importance of facts as the basis for a national conversation.
Is that part of what you're trying to stress in your programming?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we
Yeah.
try to help them understand that, look, misinformation elicits a strong emotional reaction. And even if it's a viral rumor that seems to uphold your side of a debate, it's actually not helping you or your side at all.
Yeah.
It's kind of exploiting you to amplify it and to spread it, and impugning your information credibility, your information reputation as well. So
Yeah. I've tried to engage people with a very different worldview than I have. And when I have presented facts, they'll say, well, I don't believe any of that. And that sort of ends the conversation. I don't know how to proceed from there because I know that what I'm saying is obvious and it's true, and I have evidence that would be admissible in court to prove it's true. And so is there a way around that? Is there a way to make that more emotionally engaging?
I would say the way around it is to help people evaluate evidence more carefully and critically. So I think the trap that people have fallen into is that, look, no source of information is perfect, therefore all sources of information are equally valid. That's a big mistake in reasoning that a lot of people make.
Yeah.
No news organization is perfect. They make mistakes. They write headlines that could be better,
Yeah.
that could be framed better. They're doing this work, by the way, on with limited resources on tight deadlines. But even still, right, those things happen. They are imperfect, but the standards to which they aspire, aren't controversial. They are not things that we should eschew. But not everybody's in that same community of practice. Not everybody's engaging in good faith. And so I think what we're seeing to some degree among the public is that if you consider all sources as equal, then you fall into all sorts of traps, right? That you think that this partisan blog written by one person in their basement with no editor, no fact checker, is as valid as a legacy news organization, and that you can just find whatever information upholds your views and point to that and ignore everything else. So I think we have to get to a place where people are distinguishing between degrees of credibility. Stop thinking that everything is a binary, and that because nothing's perfect, everything's equal, and really, get to a place where people are evaluating evidence and facts a little more honestly, together.
I hope someday that is what happens, and that we can bring about that change, and that I can stay calm enough to engage even when people say, well, I don't believe that, and to keep arguing what I think are facts. So I know from talking to some other friends that college professors and librarians are using your programs and trying to, for example, when a student asks for a book, they will try to use ways of saying, well, here's another book on the same subject that you might want to see. Has that been something you've aimed at, or it's just happening because the resources that you provide are so good?
We'll always say the latter, Jill. It's just because
that was
our
sort of a
resources,
leading question. I
yeah,
expected.
our resources are so good, and they are. I will say that what we found in a lot of public schools that we work with in a lot of districts, when we look at all the educators that are using our materials, a very large percentage of them are librarians. Today, they're more commonly called like media center directors. They've moved on, but essentially, we know why there's such a large cohort of our users, and there's two reasons. Number one, this is their reason for being now, helping students not necessarily just check out a book or find a resource, but to navigate this information landscape. This is now, we've had some librarians tell us that, they have their students spend more time on computers, than in the card catalog, that kind of thing that we probably all remember from school. But the second reason that they're such vociferous users of our materials is, in many cases, they're one of the only staff members in a middle school or a high school who actually has access to every student. That every student will come to the library, at least once a week or however the school may plan it. And so that they are perfectly positioned to be the faculty member that is actually teaching these skills to students. And so librarians we're big fans of. They make up a very large cohort of our educator population. And then in terms of those in college, yes, while we target sort of 8th through 11th grade in our materials, with enough adapting and moving around, many college professors, especially in the freshman, sophomore level, have found it quite useful to embed in their classes as well. And as Peter said, it's free of charge. It's open to everyone. And so basically anyone who wants to use it can use it.
I'm hoping that you can reach enough younger children that it won't be necessary at the college level, that they will, by the time they get to college, be able to read and evaluate and weigh the merits of different sources of information and look at, who is reporting directly. And also, of course, one of the benefits of today reading online is, for example, when I read a reporter's report of, let's say, a Supreme Court decision, I can click within that article and I can read the opinion myself. I don't have to take that person's opinion of what the opinion says. I can look for myself. And I find that very helpful. And I hope that some of our viewers do the same thing when they read online, is to go deeper and form your own opinion. Or if you're reading the Wall Street Journal, look at a different point of view in the New York Times, so that you can then say, well, that makes sense or that doesn't make sense. And you're teaching people to do that, and it's so important. I hope that everyone who's watching us now will go to your website, and you can tell the two of you are former educators, because you are basically still doing education. And I am so happy about what you're doing, and I thank you for taking on this task. I hope everyone in America will eventually have had training in news literacy, so that we can have a conversation going forward based on facts, not just someone who has an opinion, but based on what is true, because facts matter. And that's why I have this show called Just the Facts. So thank you for being with us today. And is there anything that you'd like to say to our viewers, in support of what you're doing?
Sure, I'll go first. I think a lot of people are concerned and maybe a bit overwhelmed
Yeah.
by not only the amount of information that they receive every day, but the amount of disinformation that's out there. And I always tell people, we're never going to end disinformation.
Yeah.
That's not the point, and that shouldn't be the goal. But we can empower people to navigate the information landscape and be able to identify that disinformation to make good choices for themselves, their families, and their communities. And so there is something that we can do about it.
Jill, I would add that I think in today's political environment, in this hyperpolarized kind of partisan environment, that a lot of folks attack journalists. That's always been true.
Yeah.
And I think there's an attempt on the part of a lot of folks to attack the press and to get people to trust them less, to trust reporters less. And to trust them more, right? Listen to me, not news organizations that are here watching what I do and holding me accountable. And I think it's a good time to remind everybody of that kind of information, that kind of cynicism about news sources is strategic, and that folks and politicians on the left and right engage in this, and it has to a large degree eroded the public's belief that there are news organizations that are sincerely and honestly trying to report on the news of the day at the local level, regional level, national level. And so not to fall into that trap that journalists, all news organizations are out to manipulate and spin. The news organizations out there doing original reporting, who have people on the ground, who have standards for accountability, for fairness, for accuracy.
Yes.
Those standards show up in their work, and you can recognize it if you really stop and look. But if you fall victim to that idea that nothing is there to inform you, everybody's out to somehow secretly manipulate you, that's a really fundamentally disempowering disposition, and it's one that can't sustain a democracy. So, well,
you guys certainly are there to empower people, and that I applaud. I would also just add, it's not the reporters, it's headline writers that often mislead, not deliberately. I'm not saying it's deliberate, but it's hard to capture in a headline the nuance of a story. And so sometimes if you only read the headline, you're not getting the real facts and the story.
Impossible to capture, I would say.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you exist as an organization, and I am going to make sure that the Evanston schools have this in their schools, because I want the people around me to be educated to evaluate the sources of information they take in. So thank you.
With that, Jill, I appreciate that. I'd just say, in addition to our website, if anybody is interested in having the News Literacy Project work with their local school district, they can simply send us an email at info@newslit.org, and we can take it from there.
That's the best ending that I've ever heard. Please, everybody, do it. Send that email to info@newslit.org, or go on their website and learn for yourself all the information that you need to make this a reality for you and for the children in your life who may not be at a school that has this program yet. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back next week. We'll be talking about how to improve the messaging from Democrats, and not the message in the sense of what it contains, but how to communicate it on what channels and in what words so that it will reach that emotional chord that will get through to people. Thank you for being with us today. See you next week.